Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that is what makes them awesome. So today, our guest is Joe Beach. Tell me that I can't are only words of motivation for Joe. Born and raised in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, the youngest of five, Joe always found a way to get things done her way. Wickedly smart and full of creativity, Joe found her way into the fashion world and now owns and operates her own clothing company, Cedar and Vine. Joe believes in the slow fashion model to reduce landfill waste of clothing and is now restoring a historic building in Weyburn to create business opportunities in her community. Joe exemplifies what it means to better the pond. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Beach. Joe Beach, thank you ever so much for spending the time to be a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. It is absolutely fabulous to have you.
Thank you for having me. This is
So we
great.
have, so obviously we got to do a shout out. In my last podcast, we did a shout out to Tim Beach of Charles Glen Toyota, there's Alberta's celebration destination. So he's the one that, so there's his shout out. And he's the one that connected us. So I really appreciate him for putting us together so we can tell your story.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm very lucky to have such an awesome father-in-law.
Not everyone can say that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm lucky. I mean, I have an amazing family, and then my in-laws are also equally amazing. So I've been doubly blessed.
Aren't you the fortunate one?
Yes.
So, as you know, for this podcast, we're going to discover your backstory. We're going to discover what makes you awesome, what you're doing to better the pond, and the lessons learned for you to create your golden pond. So, that being said, let's jump right into this. So, Joe, I want to know what got you from being a gosling to leaving the nest, right? To the person that you are today. Joe Beach, what is your backstory? Take me back to the beginning.
All right. Well, some days I still feel like I'm a gosling. I have a little bit to learn yet, but um, I was born and raised in Weyburn, as you know. And I guess for the listeners who don't know where Weyburn is, it's a little town. Well, rather, it's classified as a city in Saskatchewan. It doesn't take much here. I think it's about 11,000 people. And I grew up here. I was the youngest of five kids, and there's quite an age gap between me and the next kid. So I almost resented that growing up because I was kind of seen as like the annoying little tag along who wasn't really included in playing with my older siblings. But
So tell me,
I
so how many brothers, how many sisters, and what's the age gap?
Okay, so there's two girls, me is one, and three brothers. So my oldest brother's 11 years older than me, and then they're all 2 years apart. So there it goes boy, girl, boy, boy, and then me. So yeah,
And what's
apparently my
what,
brother
what
cried when I came out a girl because he really wanted a little brother. But anyway,
so what's the gap between you and the brother the closest to you?
5 years.
5 years. That's a bit of a gap.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not crazy. And now we're all really close. But growing up, it was just kind of like that awkward amount. So it was almost like for a while, I seemed like an only child, like when they all left home. And I mean, being raised in Weyburn, you don't really stick around home. Like once you graduate, you usually, if you're going to like secondary school, you move out to the city. So
Mm.
um, anyway, but looking back, I didn't realize how lucky I was because I kind of like had this whole group of older advisors who kind of kept me in line, but at the same time, I kind of got to fly under the radar and do what I wanted. My mom says I was quite independent because we grew up on an acreage, so I it's not like I could hang out with friends every night after school. But I I was always making huge messes apparently. Like I would have crafts out everywhere and be inventing things and so
Oh, here we go. So the history is repeating itself. This is great. I love it. That so you were the crafty kid.
yeah.
You could take the popsicle sticks out and make something out of it. That was your shtick.
Yes, I loved just making things. And also like my dad, he owns a steel fabrication shop and they've been in business for 30 years. So I think growing up with like that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit around is kind of like I was always into like creating things and trying my hand at different projects. So and having the resources to do so because like I said, we were on a farm and we had like a workshop and tools. So that was really fun. I can say I was very blessed in the way that I've never had the opportunity yet to be bored in my life. So that's
So
good.
did you ever get a chance? Did you ever like go hang around your dad's shop like the workplace outside of being on the acreage?
Yeah, I did. So we all kind of worked for my dad growing up. I feel like we were lucky in a way because my parents never give us an allowance. Like obviously we were well provided for, but it was kind of like if you want your money of your own, you should work for it. So we did, and we all kind of worked around either the acreage or my dad's shop. And when I got older, I worked more there. Um, but yeah, we were definitely like our whole family was very involved in the business. I'd say my other siblings were more than me, maybe because um, they were, I was kind of just coming along after them, and there was already four people working in the business. So I think that's kind of one of the reasons I was free to take my own path in a way.
So I have to ask you the question. So you got the older brothers, right? There's the acreage, there's the steel fabrication plant, then there's you who loves to build and create. Now, were you labeled the tomboy? I have to ask the question.
I wouldn't say really like the tomboy because I was kind of like into like design and I mean, not that I was like really like a fashionista in any way, but I was like, it wasn't like I was out there welding every night, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't know if I'd really be seen as like a tomboy. Probably now I would be more, because I'm always covered in paint now. And when people see me around town, I'm like usually covered in nano materials and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and the reason I asked that question is a lot of the work that I do has to do with instincts,
Oh,
and so the instinctual part of us is how we get things done. So it's how we problem solve. And one of the really fascinating things with that is girls who have a natural instinctive talent to build. Right, so that's their way of figuring out the world. So whether you're male or female, you go out and you okay I want to build something. I want to be able to touch it and feel it and see what it is so that that's how I can problem solve in the world. As a boy, it was very acceptable, right, to be in the shop and to fix the vehicle and to build. But as a girl, right, there was the label of a tomboy.
yeah.
And it's interesting because it makes no sense to me as why a girl would get a label because she wants to fabricate and build and design, right?
Yeah.
And so it really debunks the whole story of being a tomboy. You just happen to be a female who likes to build things,
Yeah.
right? And so that label I'm not a huge fan of, and that's why I had to actually ask the question.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I guess I never really and like in my mind, I've never thought of the like the label tomboy as like a negative thing, I guess. And I
Mm,
think maybe that's just like a generational thing.
mhm.
But yeah, I I don't know. I wasn't really aware of it, I guess. I was always kind of in my own little world, to be honest. I like when I was like a lot younger, I had a huge imagination. I had many imaginary friends and like this whole kind of alternate world that I lived in. So I think in a way I was kind of like oblivious to all that.
You just lived in your own world. That's great. Right? You're just who you are. So
Yeah.
this is how we're going back, see into your backstory, and we're discovering all these things that make you awesome. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. So
Well, I don't know if it's awesome or not, but it
oh,
definitely has shaped, I guess, who I am.
and you're awesome. So therefore that explains that. So so what was it like, so living in Weyburn, obviously you went to elementary school there, and then you stayed in high school in Weyburn as well?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I was very involved in like extracurricular things and music and all that growing up, even more than my siblings, I guess, because like I was kind of like I wouldn't say like a loner, but I like at home I didn't hang out with my siblings as much growing up. Um, and then also since I was the only one left at home, my parents had a bit more time to run me to all these things because I mean it's not like you can just walk there when you live on the farm. Yeah, so it was kind of funny in a way because in I was actually much more of like an academic student in high school, and not that I'm not saying this in any way to brag or seem like I'm smart because really and truly in real life I'm not that brilliant, but I think I was just lucky that the way like school is set up and the way we learn is some like a way that really worked for me. And so in school, I actually had like a 99 average in math and all my sciences, and it was art that was actually my lowest mark. It brought my average down. So the fact that I chose to like pursue a career in like the creative industry was kind of a shock to some people, and I don't know if it's necessarily like what my parents would have chose for me, but they've always been super supportive. And I think, I mean, in my mind, I guess maybe partly it's from being the youngest child too, and just kind of being a little bit freer, but I've never really been afraid of doing things. And my kind of like ever since I was, I guess, in like junior high or high school, I've just always had this feeling like, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? Like I'll try clothing design, and what's the worst thing that can happen? I could always go back to school and do something maybe more stable or maybe more geared towards like my natural like skill set. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I think growing up with my dad just loving so much what he did every day, I was like, that's what I want. Like I want to just love going to work every day. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of a little bit of backstory of how I ended up in fashion design. It was just something that I like really wanted to do. I wanted to make things, and this was the medium I chose. And I thought that choosing a career that I was passionate about and that like I was really excited about was more important for me than maybe choosing something that was super stable and maybe something I knew I would be good at, if that makes sense. This is the rambly part of me going on.
And that's fine. It's all part of this. So if you were to look at yourself now, presently, and we'll get into this of what you're doing presently, but I mean, with the business that you have, you're taking a chance. You got this new building, so you're a bit of a risk taker. Do you see that same um, piece of you when you were little as well, just taking the chance, taking the risk? Hey, let's see what'll happen. Let's try this, let's try that, and kind of figure it out as you go along.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, and like I say, I feel like I keep referring to myself as being the youngest child, but in a way, it's like you don't have a lot of like the pressure on you, maybe as like the older siblings, or at least in my family. So I kind of would just like do random things all the time, like on a whim. And I've always been very instinctual. Like if I feel like I should do something, then I just do it and see what happens. And yeah, I guess that's kind of just like my personality in a way. And another thing is like I usually, I mean, I call this the youngest child syndrome, kind of like knowing what you want and going for it. But it's like, yeah, I've always kind of had like a, I know what I want and I will do it. Like, don't try to tell me not to kind of thing, which can be very bad in some ways, but um, sometimes it is so.
Okay, so I have to share this with you, Joe, right? Because we share something here, right? So you are the youngest child of 5, correct?
Yeah.
I am the youngest child of 7, but
Wow.
wait, there's more. I
Oh
have
my.
6 older sisters.
Oh my goodness.
Joe, feel my pain.
That's amazing.
So,
He's alive.
and so it's funny you say how the brother, the one that's next to you, cried when you were born because he didn't, because he wanted a brother. The story goes that when Dad found out that I was born, a button popped off his shirt. So
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
but I do share that with you, though. I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up, and saying that, going for what you want and kind of doing your own thing. And I was the same way, right? I ran my own show. I mean, I did have 6 older sisters, but I still right.
So you couldn't get too far out of line.
What's that?
So you couldn't get too far out of line.
Like, yeah, that's right. They bring me back, um but it's interesting. I mean, I did things my own way, and I always, I was just like, if you tell me that I can't, I'll prove to you that I can.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I'm still that way to this day.
Yeah. And I think part of that, I mean, might be something that was passed down like from my dad, because I know like he's been in business for 35 years now, I think. And I always remember the story he told me that when he bought his business, his dad said, "Oh, you'll never make a go of it." And here he is like 35 years later. So it's, and I think his dad told him that because he knows like how my dad is. So I think, yeah, it's almost like extra motivation when somebody tells you like you can't do this. It's like, oh, well, now I really have to do it.
Absolutely. And so when I was telling you about that instinctual aspect of us, and saying about being the whole tomboy piece, that's also an instinctual aspect of us as well. Of people, with us, that are out there, the risk takers, right? That's how you get them motivated. You say, "I bet you can't," and then watch them go, right? And they'll just jump into it, and and it's that energy that we have. That's the excitement. That's the fun part, right? And we go out and we go get it. And do we get into trouble along the way? Absolutely.
Totally,
But
yeah.
but that's the fun part of it. So here you are. So you're this young girl in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. You're on the acreage. You grew up. Your dad's got your big entrepreneurial parents. You're the youngest one. Went to school. You're like you were a brainiac. 99%. I mean, like, intelligence off the charts. So
Wow.
and and creative, like, you're smart and creative, like you were the full meal deal. And so here you are growing up, and so now bring us up to what's going on today. What are you doing presently, Joe, that is making an impact in the world?
Okay. Well, I started my brand kind of back when I was going to college, and that's taken me on quite a journey. I've been like I started that in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and then I ended up moving to Toronto, which was an amazing experience and kind of another one of those things that just happened. And I mean, it was like late August, and I was in Toronto for a sourcing event for my brand, and I met this amazing lady who was starting this post grad program at George Brown College, and she told me about it, and the program was starting in 2 weeks, and I was just like, I have to do this. And I really didn't want to move to Toronto at all, but there was just like something in me like this. For some reason, I felt like I have to do this. So I literally moved in a week, and I started the program. And then that was probably the best thing that ever happened for my brand, is moving out there. And that's kind of where I got more into like the manufacturing side of like actually making my brand more, I guess, commercially viable, um, and growing it. Like, I wouldn't say it's like scaled to like a huge, massive brand, but it's more, yeah, I guess more of a brand, whereas before it was more like custom.
Mhm.
Um, and so I continued doing a lot of trade shows down there and just putting myself out there, and kind of like consistently, organically growing it. And then with COVID, it was a little bit of a shock to obviously everyone's system. And my husband and I were just married in January, so of like 2020. So we were living in Toronto in a basement suite without a kitchen and without laundry, and it was interesting. It was like a character building experience. But when COVID hit, it was kind of like that point where you start questioning things. And if we want our marriage to last, maybe we shouldn't be living in 600 square feet.
I love you, but
Yeah. No, I'm being dramatic, but we were kind of just like, yeah, what are we doing here if we can't like actually have any of the benefit of being in Toronto because everything was shut down.
okay, I have to ask this. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm really intrigued here.
Mhm.
You were the first person that I've talked to have a COVID wedding, as it were. And so what was it like for you to I mean, typically it's the big wedding and everyone's there and the big celebration, the party and right? And with everything changing, what did you do and how did you manage that?
Well, we were actually so lucky. I feel like luck is on my side because we had our wedding in January of 2020. So it was like right before all of this craziness happened. Like, obviously, no one's seen it coming. And we were actually married in Hawaii. So all our guests were coming over. And so it would have been completely canceled if it was 3 months later. But we had like the perfect timing. We were just getting settled back into our regular routine, and then this happened. So yeah, in a way, I can't say that I really had any of that stress. But we did plan my sister's wedding in COVID, and it was interesting. I mean, in a way, I've attended a few weddings in the COVID this period, I guess you could call it. And it is kind of cool in a way because it's very intimate. Like, you are forced to only have the people who are closest to you. But
Right.
it's definitely, I mean, wedding planning is stressful enough as it is, but then when you add this factor in, it's like
Well, that's why I was asking the question, right? So obviously you were very fortunate that it sort of, before everything really hit, you were fortunate to have that. But I know this for a lot of people, getting married, I mean that, yeah, it's stressful enough as it is, right? And then you throw this on top of it, right? And there's so many limitations. It's a milestone in your life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I honestly, I feel for people in that situation because it's so fresh in my mind, and
Mm.
I'm just like, oh man, like I cannot imagine having to like add that stress on top of everything you're already planning and dealing with. So yeah, but it happens.
It happens. And love conquers all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to go back just a little bit what you were saying before, Joe. Could you talk about your brand? And I'd really like, for myself, I'm really curious, and for the listeners as well, tell me about the brand, the name of your brand, take me back into how did that come to be? And like, how did that come to pass?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, my brand is called Cedar Vine, and it's kind of a random name. People ask me if I have a story, and I really don't. Besides, it's just like, again, one of those instinctual whims that just came to me at like 3 in the morning, where I liked the sound of it. But um, really, our brand, it's a slow fashion brand, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but essentially what it means is basically designing and creating and consuming ultimately for longevity. So it's the principle is getting away from this kind of like disposable consumer driven fast fashion trend that we're on, if that makes sense. um, and really it's about quality over quantity, so investing in pieces that last and kind of getting back to like where we used to be, where you would invest in a few pieces a season and you would wear them for years. And that's kind of um, like the foundation, I guess, of our brand. So we really focus on timeless design and using good quality fabrics, and that's one of the reasons we choose to use linen as our primary fabric. I don't know how much you know about linen, but it's like one of the strongest natural fibers.
Nothing.
Um, yeah, I feel like since I work with it every day, I just expect everyone to think that linen is the most awesome thing ever, but then I realize that most people don't even know what it is. But um, yeah, the one of the reasons I love linen is because I truly feel that it gets better with age, and that's like one of the
Hmm.
things we're trying to promote is really like that sense of attachment to your clothing and valuing it rather than just seeing it as something that you throw away. Like, I mean, back a few decades ago or whenever, people would buy a few garments and when they got a hole, they would mend it and
Mhm.
they would get a long life out of their garments. So it's really just, yeah, that idea of investing in quality and not being so wasteful. And I like to use the analogy of cost per wear. So you can, I mean, spend $200 and invest in a great quality piece that you love and you'll wear for years. And say you wear that garment 20 times, then your cost per wear would be the same as like a cheap $20 t-shirt that you wear twice. But at the same time, you're also supporting like an ethically made garment and an ethical brand. Even hopefully it's made in your local economy and it's supported the right things. So it's really that idea of just um, being transparent with your consumers and creating a garment that is, I mean, I think intentional design is something that works for the good of everything it affects. So it, I mean, it's fair wages to your employees, it's being good to Mother Earth, and also it's benefiting the consumer in a great way. So
You're jumping way ahead of me here, Joe. You're already into like, what are you doing to better the pond already? We haven't even got there yet.
I told you I have a tendency to ramble.
I'm gonna pull you back. So we had this agreement before we started this podcast. Before I jump into the next question, though, I'm intrigued. Your 3 o'clock in the morning aha moment, that instinctual, there it was.
Mhm.
Um, and I know you said earlier you don't have a story about your brand name, but what was it? Do you remember that moment? Do you remember that pivotal, 3 o'clock in the morning, you woke up and there it was? Do you still remember that?
Well, I actually was still awake, and yes, I do remember it, but I was awake sewing. So it wasn't really like I woke out of my
Three and
sleep.
3 o'clock in the morning, you're sewing?
Yeah, those were back in the days when I was like a one-woman show, and I mean, someone has to do it, so and I think when you're that fresh and you're so, like I said, you're like passionate about what you do,
Mhm.
it's just like fun. It's not work at that point. Not to say that like every day is like so awesome and sunshine and rainbows and everything, but like you do what you have to do. And yeah, I don't know. It's just like one of those things I liked it and I committed to it. And I mean, there's definitely been times when I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is not right. But I think it's like really just committing to that thing. And it's grown. Actually, the first show I did, I always, this is something that keeps me going. Some amazing stranger came up and she liked my design and everything. And she just said, do one thing a day to better your brand and make improvements, and it'll turn into something. So I think it's like a combination of like making that commitment to your vision and then just sticking with it. And it's consistency. It's not like everything happens overnight, or I mean, some people are lucky that it does happen overnight, but um, for me, it was more of just like an organic growth and every day just like kind of
Yeah.
just grinding away and things happen over time.
Absolutely. Just one, every journey begins with a single step, right? And it's just,
Yeah.
one foot in front of the other, and you keep moving and you keep moving and keep moving, and eventually you'll get there. Welcome to the entrepreneurial world.
Yes.
So I still have to come back, and I know, and as I said earlier, that we don't have a big long story about Cedar and Vine, but can you tell me that moment when like Cedar and Vine was born? Where did that, what's the little, even a little bit of history behind why Cedar and Vine?
Well, I guess from the very beginning, and even when I was in college, like I always had this thought that I wanted like to have a brand that was like meaningful to me and wasn't just like, because there's so many clothes out there, right? And like
Mhm.
I actually hate going to malls because it's kind of like discouraging in a way. It's like, oh my goodness, there's like so many people obviously doing the same thing. But um I so for me, it was just this idea of like really creating something that was niche and that connected with people and like something deeper than just like, oh, that's a cool thing to wear. So it was almost like a whole lifestyle for me. And obviously that's evolved a lot over time, but that's kind of like the foundation, and it's still the same today. And then my value of just wanting it to be made in Canada and having this very ethical brand, um, that was always at the forefront, I guess. So in terms of actually starting, and a lot of people ask me this, it's funny, like especially when I was in Toronto, I'd always meet with students and they'd be like, how do you just start a brand? But it's like it was kind of random. I just signed up for a show and I didn't have a line or anything, but I had this like deadline and I knew there's going to be all these people watching. So it's like, I better get my bum in gear here and start creating some garments. So I had a month and I just hammered out a line of clothes, and that was the beginning. And then I started getting orders, and that's kind of where like the organic growth came in. Obviously at that time I was still working because I wasn't making enough from my brand at that time to support myself. And then it just kind of evolved over time. And so that's kind of my biggest piece of advice to people is just like you just have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like I can tend to be on like the perfectionist side, but it's kind of like that saying goes, like done is better than perfect. And so if you do set these like very like rigid or like tangible events for yourself, then it forces you to overcome that like perfectionism or procrastination, whatever you want to call it, and just put something out there. And then from there, you evolve. But if you don't actually take action, it'll always just be like an idea, I guess.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is progress, not perfection.
Yes. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay, last question before we move on. I'm still incredibly curious. Why the name Cedar and Vine?
Oh no, I knew you were gonna grill me on this because everyone does. And I wish I was like better at making things up because I could really come up with an extravagant story, but I honestly just like I always have loved natural fibers and like that kind of whole idea of like just being connected with your clothing. And so to me, like the name Cedar and Vine is very natural and
Mhm.
I liked the way it sounded together. It kind of went along because I only use natural fibers, and I mean, I'm primarily linen, but at that time I was just focused on all natural fibers, kind of. And honestly, I just loved the way it sounded, and it kind of was on brand, like for me.
Mhm.
Like, I, it kind of embodied what I wanted it to. And it seems like an inclusive name. It was just something appealed to me about it. I wish I had a better answer for
No,
you.
that's a good story. My curiosity has now been satisfied, Joe. Now I know. So
Yeah.
let's move on. So, Joe, I believe that we are all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits. So, can you tell me about a time in your life where you were different, where you stood out? It could be either a positive story or a negative story. And it kind of goes into like, what's that part of you that makes you awesome? What makes you different, Joe?
Well, I think just on a whole, like if you think of like a fashion like designer or like even the fashion industry in general, I wouldn't say that I super fit in. Like I don't really follow trends and I don't read fashion magazines or keep up with like the latest high-end designers or any of that stuff. I mean, if you see me around town, you definitely wouldn't think that I'm a fashion designer because I'm usually covered in paint or something ridiculous. But yeah, so I think in a way that's kind of made me feel like I don't fit in a lot of the time, like at different events or things like that. Um, but it's like to me, it's not really about like that like glamorous side, I guess, of fashion that you really think about when you like envision like fashion design or like fashion runways. And I think honestly that is one of the reasons I'm still in this industry because it's really not as glamorous as it seems. And I think a lot of people go into this industry because they like that side of it. It appeals to them. But for me, it was always more like the manufacturing side and like the designing and product development that intrigued me. And so in a way, I kind of feel fortunate that I was a misfit in that way, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. It reminds me though of a bit when you were younger, going back, right? And you said like you were kind of you did your own thing. There was that gap. You were kind of the loner. You just you kind of did your own thing back as a kid. And
Yeah.
when I listen to you, I can really equate that back to that's kind of the same thing you're doing now, right? Like
Yeah.
right, it's the same thing. You're just doing it in a different way, right? Which tells me that that's truly authentic and that's truly who you are.
Yeah. I think, I mean, growing up with like how I did and stuff, it's kind of like work has always been like part of your identity. And I mean, it's like for me, I don't even feel like I know what a work life balance is. It's kind of just all like one big thing. And so I think that partly like has had like what you're saying, it's the effect that it's had on me too. But um, yeah, like even growing up with my parents, it was like I've never heard my dad say like, "Oh, I have to go to work." It's like he loved it. Like it
Mhm.
was hard to get him to stop work. We'd have to like call him every night and tell him to come home for supper. And it was never like, "Oh, you like." My parents installed very good work ethics into all of us, but it wasn't like, "Oh, you should work really hard so that you can have a nice life." It's like you should work at something you enjoy, and that will make you work hard because you'll want to, and then you'll have a nice life, or you'll at least have like fulfillment in what you do.
Yeah, I would have, if I was to sort of summarize what you just said, it's not work, it's a purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're a little bit more articulate than me.
I
Well,
wouldn't say I'm incredibly articulate, but well, no, that's fantastic. And my dad was the same way, and I mean, dad did work hard, but dad never ever complained about work. Right? He went and he worked, and he had his own trucking company for a while, but they were entrepreneurial, right? And he did what he needed to do, but it was purposeful. It wasn't like the drudgery of, oh, I have to go and do my 9 to 5.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you're still maintaining that to this day. So good on you. I mean, I think that it's really so important because we try to do this work-life balance thing, and when we try to separate them, but when it's purposeful, it's never work. It's just something that you're committed to making the world a better place. And that, my dear, is actually why you're on this podcast, which we're going to get to.
Oh boy.
So can you tell me about a time in your life, Joe, where someone did something for you that left an impact, that left a mark on your life?
I did see this question before, and I find it hard because there's so many. Like, I feel like honestly, every day people are doing things for me, and I'm just like, like, how are you so awesome? Like, I am so fortunate to be surrounded by amazing people, and my team is amazing. I don't know how they put up with me. And then my family, and then my husband, he actually, we started dating right after high school, so he's kind of always been there, and I think that's really important because he's been there from the beginning, so he kind of knows what to expect with me. Like, he's more of like a planner, and I'm very random, so it's
Mhm.
great because we balance each other out. So he's been a huge support. Like, even though like the design part and all that's not really his cup of tea, but just having someone there to support you in the background, and like, even if it means answering my angry phone calls and coming to fix my printers when they break down, like, all that stuff is worth gold. Um, and then, I mean, my parents have been a huge supporter of what I've done. And I think the good thing about them is that they've been in business for so long that they understand the highs and lows. And they're, I mean, they do encourage like dreaming in a sense, but they're also very practical. And so I think, in terms of like making an impact, that was kind of like sitting down with them. And every year we kind of have like an annual meeting where we just like review things and I get their opinions. And I mean, it's not that I only talk to them once a year, I do it all the time, but that's kind of where we like sit down and have like a formal like talk. And I remember, um, when I started out and I told my parents this is what I want to do, they're like, well, it all starts with a sale. And I was kind of like, for a minute, because like up until that point when you're in college and stuff, it's all kind of like about the art and learning and the design. But then I think that's kind of like the moment where it's like, oh, okay, so if I actually want to do this as a career, it has to be commercially viable, because if you can't be financially sustainable, you'll never be able to like continue to do what you love and even to make an impact in any way, right? So
That's what you
um
call. That's why some of those things are called hobbies.
yes. And I think that was kind of like what they were trying to make me understand. And I think that has had a huge impact because it's kind of made me realize that there has to be a balance, and you have to, if you do want to make an impact, then you also have to be practical and like be financially sustainable. So I think, yeah, I can't honestly just say one specific moment in my life, but there's been a few of those moments where you're like, okay, this is clicking together now.
But I think though
So
that's, what you said, and your dad said it all starts with a sale, right? That's a pretty impactful moment for you to realize, like, hey, wait a second, right? Yeah, this isn't a hobby, and this is something I want to do, but I have to be viable, right?
yeah,
That leaves a mark, that leaves an imprint, and
yeah,
and there's also a reason why you said that today, because that's obviously coming to mind.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of moments, but I think those ones in the beginning kind of stand out to you because
Hmm.
it's kind of like those first moments where real life like hits you and you're like, okay, this is fun and I love it and I'm passionate about it, but there's also like real responsibilities if I'm gonna do this as a career. So
Darn.
like every year we go over our goals, it's like, well, that's a lot of dresses to sell, but I believe in you. But I think that's the most amazing part about like having your parents as mentors is because they, especially ones that have been in business, is
Mhm.
they truly care for your success and they are honest with you. And that is a relationship I don't take for granted because it is hard. There's lots of people that like believe in you and are encouraging and amazing, and I don't take that for granted either. But to have people who are like truly honest and will tell you straight to your
Mhm.
face is very almost rare, I guess.
I would say that, and I agree with you, because I mean, that's some of my business mentors that I've had along the way. The ones that stood out the most, the ones that really made a difference in my life, were the ones that were honest. That
Mhm.
just told you the way that it was, right? And because they had the experience. Now, you may
Yeah,
not have liked what you heard at the time, but right. But when you look back, it was sage advice, right? But they had the relationship there and the trust to be able to actually, give you they gave you the goods. It was the truth, right? But that's the good stuff.
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, like you say, it's not always what you want to hear, but it, it's definitely it's one way to kind of, I mean, I've learned a lot of things the hard way, but it is nice when you can hear it before you do learn it the hard way, kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's go.
Something
School of hard
else.
knocks sometimes works. So you led into this earlier, Joe. You kind of you jumped over a few questions, but I want to know, what are you doing now presently to better the pond? And when we had talked earlier, and you led into the podcast earlier too, of using sustainable fabrics, and you said it's the what did you say? It was the slow fashion, right?
Mhm.
I think it's a really interesting concept. So tell me what you're doing now to better the pond. And also I want to know, and to me, this is the most important question, is why?
Okay. Well, kind of what we're most excited about right now and what we've been able to pivot towards with our brand is our made to order model. So that's kind of, I guess, in terms of bettering the pond, in my mind, this is a very sustainable approach and a good way that we can work towards making some of those like much needed changes in our industry, just because it's so wasteful now, like how things are done with fast fashion and overconsumption.
Hmm.
And I mean, for us, it works great for a few different reasons. One is because as a small like company, we cannot afford to produce like 10,000 of each style in an ethical way.
Right.
And so this way we actually, it is like viable for us to produce the garments that basically we get orders for and then we produce them, so we can offer a huge size range so we can be inclusive. We um, can even customize the sizing, and I think that's like a big thing going forward that people are looking for.
Hmm.
And of course, if I want people to spend money on my brand and invest in a good quality product, I'm happy to offer something that is very functional for them. So that's one great thing that we can offer, more like styles and sizes and even colorways for people so that they really can get a product that they truly love and feel good investing in. And then obviously the obvious is that it reduces waste. You don't have inventory sitting there that's ending up in landfill. And another great perk is that you're not forcing your consumers into buying things because they're on sale, or not that we don't ever have sales, but you're not like forcing all this extra inventory that you have left over on consumers and things that they might not necessarily even want or end up in landfill. So it's kind of nice that you can produce as needed. And I think that's it going forward, like in terms of sustainable manufacturing and design, that is a great way to do it. And now that we have the technology, we do all our pattern making digitally, and we have an automatic cutting machine. So that kind of helps bridge, I guess, it makes it possible for us to be able to do our manufacturing that way. Obviously, each garment is still sewn individually, but
And how's it being embraced by the public? I mean, and I agree with you. We're as consumers, right? It's easy to go to the mall and go to whatever place you buy your clothes from, and it's just mass production, and it is and to be honest with you, a lot of times the quality just really isn't there. So basically you'll buy this, oh, I don't wear that anymore, and off it goes to either the landfill or whatever people are doing with it. So you're coming in with a whole different sort of attitude with it, is like, buy this, wear it for a long duration of time, right? And then have that be part of you because it's custom designed. So that's, you kind of have ownership in it versus just going and buying a mass produced product made out of Malaysia or whatever the case may be.
yeah, totally. And I think one of the most rewarding, I guess, I don't know what the word is for consequences, but in a good way, but rewarding results of doing things this way is the connections with people, because that's what a lot of, at least my customers, are looking for, is that like experience and connection to the brand. And that's part of valuing their clothing. They know that it's made in Canada. They can, I mean, we try to be fully transparent. If you want to come to our studio, I mean, it's a little out of the way for most people, but you can like see everything. Like, we're not hiding anything, where our things are sewn right here. um, I think it's that experience that people are looking for. And I mean, they can contact us and get advice on sizing. And so I think that's kind of like part of it as well, I guess, is the whole story and brand connection that people feel when they wear it. And so I think that is one of the most rewarding and unexpected things about having my own brand, is that I've made all these like friends, even that like, it goes beyond just like, oh, you're buying a garment from me. It's like, okay, now we kind of share this commonality and we have this same value system. And it's very neat. That's one of the things that kind of blew me away about owning my own business, is I didn't really think about that part of it when I started. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that I mean, the connections that you make and the relationships that you form through your business is just so much bigger than the business itself.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's really cool about it is that, like, you're putting your value system and your product out there. So naturally, you just attract the people that are into the same things as you and believe the same things. Because obviously, if you aren't into my clothing and design and philosophy, you're not going to stop at my booth and talk to me, and you're not going to reach out on my website. So that's the really cool thing, is it's like a matchmaker kind of.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, but when he talks about your why, right? It's like, your prime customer or the relationship, right? They believe what you believe, right? It's not
Yeah.
about what you do. It's not about what you make, and it's not about how you make it, but it's why. And that's where you get the really in-depth relationships with people and those real true connections.
Yeah.
And that's just really good business.
That's funny that you bring that up because I have that video, his TED Talk, bookmarked on my computer.
Ah,
I think it's really good. It's like a good motivator whenever you're kind of feeling a little uninspired.
sure,
But
absolutely. And also, it's going to mention, I'm not sure if you're going to go there or not, but you have the Signal Hill Arts Center building, which has got a whole incredible history to it. We talked before, but you're in the midst of, and you, again, as you said, you're walking around town with paint and drywall dust all over you. But one of the things I think is really fascinating is you're taking this old heritage building and then renovating it into a space where people can come and lease space from you, and so you're doing something also for the community to better the pond.
yeah, this is kind of our latest endeavor, which is really exciting for me. Um, it's actually I just have to tell this like story because I think it's kind of funny, but like I like to kind of write like my vague 5 year like vision or goals every once in a while. And it's like I'm not super type A, so it's kind of hard for me to like actually write down my goals because sometimes I don't even know exactly where I'm headed. But like I guess this was about 4 years ago now. I wrote down like my dream like studio space is to own a brick building and to be able to have my studio space in there and like work and also live there. And obviously at the time I was living in Toronto, I had absolutely no intention of moving back to my hometown, and let alone purchasing like a massive brick building here. I didn't even think like of one being for sale here. And here I am, like 4 years later, and it's exactly came true. So it's just kind of funny because I I just think, I mean, now I believe more than ever in the power of like kind of having that like goal to work towards, even though it wasn't like something consciously like every day I'm working toward it, but it's kind of like one of those things where the universe just aligns and it happens in a way you don't expect. Anyway, so I digress, but yeah, basically when we moved back to Weyburn, I was still operating my business and kind of rebuilding it here. And this amazing opportunity came up to purchase this building, and it's a heritage building, and crazy enough, my husband's grandpa was born here. So that's kind of cool too. Like there's so much history. Some of my aunties were born here. And it was kind of a shame to see it just sitting. The city had it for sale because it used to be an art center um, for the city of Weyburn, but they're building a new one now. And so it's kind of just one of those moments where everything aligned, and here we are. We kind of have a big project on our hands. It's, I think, around 17,000 square feet.
Ooh.
So you can maybe see I'm sitting in a bit of a construction zone here, but we're fully operating our studio out of here now. And we have a few other tenants who are like artists as well, or photographers. And our goal is just to continue making it into a space that's usable and can serve a purpose again for the community. So, yeah, we're very excited about that. And it
Like,
kind of,
go ahead.
good.
I'll just say, well, and look at all the things you're doing to better the pond, right? In Weyburn, Saskatchewan,
In Weyburn, of all
of
places.
all places. That is fantastic, and that's a big undertaking. I mean, there's two things you said that I really find fascinating, and I wholeheartedly believe in the law of attraction and the energy you put out. And it's how the university kind of conspires. I believe that life is happening for you, not to you. And so when you put those things out there, it's amazing. All of a sudden there it is, right? Like, and I've always said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So,
You know what's funny about that? I wrote that in my Instagram page or like on one of my posts when I moved back to Saskatchewan to kind of update people because that's exactly how I felt.
yeah. So now looking back and looking forward, right? And the lessons that you've learned along your path, right? Can you sort of paint me a picture of what does your golden pond look like? You are the wise sage on the pond. You have a crystal ball. You've learned so much along the way. Just paint me a picture of your golden pond, Joe. What's the future look like?
My golden pond. Wow. Well, like I said, I don't plan too far in advance anymore because I never know what's going to happen. But no, I think for me, it's just growing like organically. And I think, like you say, in the law of attraction, is you attract kind of what you put out there. So um, I would love, like, I'm very excited about our future with this building, and I can't wait to have more artists and creative people be able to use this space and kind of just to be able to continue our like slow fashion made in Canada initiative with our brand and hopefully like bring, I don't know if you are familiar with the term reshoring, but it's kind of just the movement of bringing manufacturing back to Canada. And I mean, my hope too with the brand is that if people see um, a clothing brand in Saskatchewan, that they can think, well, I can do that too. Like I can do made in Canada. So um, I think just my goal would just be to consistently make those improvements every day that would contribute it in any way to the growth of this industry and to the growth of transparent practices in our industry and just I guess hopefully inspiring entrepreneurs that would be coming after and wanting to be in the fashion industry to kind of give them hope and say, hey, like this is possible and it's possible to do even in Saskatchewan, Canada. So,
I was actually kind of just led into this. Because I was gonna ask you if, if someone, now that you're the wise sage on the pond, if, someone young was coming in to your industry, whether that be in a clothing line or into whether it be fashion, art, photography, any of the, any of the creative in that creative world, what advice would you give them knowing what you know now?
I don't even know if I'm qualified to give advice, but
Oh, yes, you are.
I would, I would just basically say you gotta start somewhere. Like you don't have to have everything perfect. And I know there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability and having everything absolutely perfect brand wise because things are so transparent. But in a way, it's kind of like that is your transparency. Like, this is where I'm starting, and this is where I am, and this is where I want to be, instead of trying to have like waiting for the perfect timing and to have everything lined up before you go ahead and make the plunge. It's like if you are authentic and you tell your true story, your customers will connect to you. And nobody expects perfection. They just want honesty and they want to know that you're trying. And so I think, yeah, my advice would just be what's the worst that can happen? If you don't try, you'll never know. And then also just consistency, like every day doing those things, whatever you can in your power to move your brand forward. Because like I said, it might happen overnight for some people, but for anyone I know in business, even if it looks like it did happen overnight, it usually didn't. It's a long process. But I think that is the fun part. And for me, that's something I truly love about owning my own business is the unpredictability because it always keeps you on your toes. Like you're constantly trying to problem solve and find new ways to evolve the business and go forward. And so, you're never bored. Like, I mean, when COVID hit, it's just like, okay, this is like a pivoting point. How can we make this work for the better? And with our company, it was moving everything completely online, which has been great. And it's given us some really awesome opportunities. So I think, again, with my advice would just be always trying to find the positive, because it's like I said, not every day is going to be awesome and like full of rainbows and butterflies. And there's going to be a lot of things you have to do that you don't necessarily want to, but usually you're rewarded for it in ways you don't expect.
Absolutely. That, see, sage advice. You are, see, this is proof right now that you are qualified to give sage advice because you just gave it.
I don't know. Some days I should maybe take my own advice then.
It's always the hardest to take.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I want to, I really deeply appreciate your time. I appreciate your story. I appreciate what you're doing, especially at home here, not in Saskatchewan, only in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, but in Canada, right? You're bringing it home. And I think that's really highly valued. And it takes a ton of courage to be an entrepreneur. It takes a ton of courage to put yourself out there and take the risks that you're taking, right? And because of that, that's why you're here, because you're doing those things to better the pond, and you're making a difference. So thank you ever so much. And now we need to do the plug. So now, where can my listeners find you, Joe?
You can find us on our website, cedarandvine.net. So cedar like the tree, ANDVINE.net. Our Instagram page is Cedar and Vine, and then our Facebook page is also Cedar and Vine. So yeah, you can connect with us there, and please reach out. We're happy to hear from you.
Perfect. So cedarandvine.net, not .com, so .net, and Instagram and Facebook, Cedar and Vine. That's where people can find you.
Yes,
We'll make
that's
sure we put that out for you. So that is fantastic. So there you have it, folks. We had a great time here with Joe. This is Warren Barry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you ever so much, Joe.
Thanks for having me.